Have you ever checked into a motel and felt an inexplicable chill run down your spine, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets you were never meant to hear? Imagine stepping into room 13 at the Desert Star Motel, where the air is thick with foreboding and the shadows seem to move on their own. What happens when you ignore the warnings and dare to spend the night in a place where one guest decided to never check out? As the sun sets over the barren landscape, three friends find themselves entangled in a nightmarish reality, where the line between legend and truth blurs with every passing hour. What did they see in the mirror that made their blood run cold? Can you hear the faint echo of a long-forgotten voice calling out from the depths of the past? Brace yourself as we unravel the terrifying mystery that lurks within the haunted confines of room 13. In the stark, desolate beauty of the Desert Star Motel stands as a relic of forgotten journeys, its neon sign flickering like a beacon to the lost and the weary. Yet, beneath its dusty facade lies a chilling tale that is whispered through the corridors of time. Our story begins with three friends seeking a simple night's rest, who stumble upon a legend that refuses to remain buried. The allure of the unknown draws them into room 13, a place where reality and the supernatural entwine in a sinister dance. As the clock ticks ominously, shadows lengthen and whispers grow louder, compelling them to confront the specter that haunts these walls. What dark secrets does this room hold, and why has its former occupant's story never truly ended? Join us on this spine-tingling journey as we delve deep into the heart of true horror, where the past refuses to let go. If you're captivated by tales of eerie highways, haunted motels, and the supernatural lurking just beyond the edge of reality, subscribe to Fearway for more chilling stories that will haunt your dreams. The desert evening was settling into a deep indigo as the three friends, Mark, Lisa, and Ben, pulled into the dusty parking lot of the Desert Star Motel. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow over their faces. And as they stepped out of the car, a strange hush enveloped them, the kind that makes every hair stand on end. Against the backdrop of the vast, empty landscape, the motel seemed almost alive, whispering faint promises of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Despite the growing apprehension in their hearts, perhaps fueled by the stories they'd laughed off on the drive here, they entered the reception area where a lone, aging receptionist greeted them with a hollow smile that never reached her eyes. She handed them the key to room 13, a number spoken in a tone so low it almost slipped past unnoticed. As they walked along the dimly lit corridor, an inexplicable coldness crept into their bones, the air thickening with an unseen presence that seemed to watch with every step they took. The door to room 13 creaked open, revealing a space frozen in time, untouched by modern comforts. An old bed with a faded floral quilt, a dusty mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, and shadows that seemed to dance in rhythm with the flickering bulb overhead. Mark tossed his backpack onto the bed, the thud echoing ominously in the silence, while Lisa wandered over to the window, peering out into the endless desert night where the horizon merged with darkness. Ben, ever the skeptic, tried to shake off the unsettling vibe with a shrug, attributing it to the motel's age and disrepair. But as they settled in, a strange chill crept up the floors, whisper-soft at first, before it crescendoed into a palpable force that seemed to breathe down their necks. The mirror, which had at first seemed just a relic of bygone days, suddenly captured their attention as fog began to form on its surface, creating swirling patterns that almost resembled words. Lisa, unable to resist, stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat as a single word appeared to crystallize in the condensation. Leave. Panic seized them momentarily. But Mark, determined not to let fear dictate their actions, suggested they explore the nearby diner, hoping the normalcy of clinking cutlery and chattering patrons would dispel the eerie ambiance clinging to them. As they exited the room, leaving behind the whispering shadows, they failed to notice the door slowly closing behind them, seemingly guided by an invisible hand. The night air bit at their skin as they walked to the diner, the chill of room 13 lingering in their senses, a haunting reminder that refused to be shaken. Over steaming cups of coffee, their laughter was forced, each chuckle a feeble attempt to mask the growing unease gnawing at their insides. The stories of the infamous room, once nothing more than tales spun by the bored and imaginative, now loomed larger, demanding to be taken seriously. Mark, trying to lighten the mood, suggested they return and spend the night, convinced that a good night's sleep would dispel their irrational fears. Reluctantly, Lisa and Ben agreed, though a shadow of doubt lingered in their eyes. As they made their way back, the motel loomed once more, a silent sentinel beneath the starless sky, its windows like eyes keeping a watchful vigil over its transient guests. The key turned in the lock with a heavy finality, sealing them inside a world where time seemed to halt, leaving them trapped in the silent promise of a night filled with nightmares and whispers from the past that refused to be silenced. As they re-entered room 13, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to intensify, pressing down on them with a weight that defied explanation. The air was thicker now, the temperature dropping to a chilling degree that no desert night could reasonably explain. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that was both ancient and malevolent, as if the room itself was alive, a silent witness to untold horrors. As Mark, Lisa, and Ben settled uneasily onto the creaky furniture, their earlier bravado faded into a somber silence. Mark attempted to break the tension by turning on the small television, but all they were met with was static, the distorted whispers of a broadcast that had long since ceased to exist. The mirror on the wall, however, demanded their attention once more, its surface now rippling as though disturbed by an unseen hand. Ben, trying to rationalize the inexplicable, approached it cautiously, his breath visible in the freezing air. As he drew nearer, the fog on the glass seemed to shift and swirl with a life of its own, forming words that sent a shiver of dread down their spines. Never left. The message was clear and undeniable. Yet even as fear gripped them, a part of each resisted the impulse to flee, a compulsion they couldn't quite understand. Lisa, hugging herself for warmth, suggested they try to sleep, reasoning that perhaps exhaustion was distorting their perceptions. Yet, as they prepared to lie down, the room seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening into figures that lingered just beyond the edge of visibility. The floorboards creaked under the weight of invisible footsteps, and the cold grew more intense, as if the very essence of the room was feeding off their fear. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Mark switched off the light, hoping darkness would offer some respite from the daunting presence that loomed over them. But in the pitch black, their senses heightened, and they became acutely aware of a faint, rhythmic tapping emanating from within the walls, a sound so unnaturally consistent it set their teeth on edge. It was as if the room was breathing, inhaling their fear with each passing moment. Ben, now visibly shaken, insisted they leave immediately, But as they moved toward the door, a sudden gust of freezing air slammed it shut with a force that reverberated through the entire room. Panic surged through them, the realization dawning that escape was not an option. The room had them trapped, bound by an unseen force that seemed to revel in their terror. Huddled together in the center of the room, they felt the temperature plummet further, the shadows inching closer until they seemed to wrap around them like a suffocating shroud. Lisa's eyes darted to the mirror again, her heart pounding as she saw a new message etching itself onto the foggy surface. Too late. A chilling realization washed over them. Whatever spirit lingered in this cursed space had no intention of letting them go. And then, from the depths of the shadows, a figure began to emerge, its form indistinct yet undeniably human, eyes that glowed with a spectral light, watching them with an intensity that spoke of untold suffering. As it reached out, the room seemed to reverberate the silent scream, a cacophony of despair and longing that enveloped them whole. In that moment, caught in the grip of terror, they understood the truth of the legend. The former guest of room 13 had never left, bound to this place by the same dark forces that now ensnared them. And as the figure's outstretched hand drew closer, the world around them blurred into a vortex of darkness, swallowing them whole, leaving only the echo of their screams to linger in the chilling silence of the Desert Star Motel. The world seemed to spin away from them, leaving only the oppressive presence of the entity that now occupied the room with them. As the spectral figure edged closer, its features emerged from the shadows, a face etched with sorrow and fury, eyes that burned with an icy light, and a mouth that whispered silent, mournful cries. The room itself seemed to pulse with the entity's anguish, the walls throbbing like a heartbeat, echoing a timeless lament that resonated in the chilling silence. Lisa, Mark, and Ben stood frozen in a tableau of fear, unable to look away from the spectral intruder who seemed to peer into their very souls. The temperature continued to plummet, their breath emerging in ghostly plumes as they clung together, desperately seeking warmth and comfort in each other's presence. Mark's mind raced, trying to make sense of the supernatural chaos unfolding around them, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and primal fear. But deep down, he knew there was no rational explanation, no escape from the nightmarish grip of room 13. The motel room had become a prison, a relentless maze of shadows that twisted and contorted, swallowing any hope of escape. Ben, ever the skeptic, found his will crumbling under the spectral gaze, his once logical mind succumbing to the reality of their situation. The figure, now fully formed, extended a hand that seemed to shimmer with a cold, ethereal light. It was both an offering and a demand, a silent plea for understanding and release from the torment that had bound it to this earthly realm. Lisa, her heart pounding with terror, felt an inexplicable pull toward the apparition, a connection that transcended the bounds of reality and reason. She stepped forward, her fingers grazing the shimmering hand, and in that instant, a flood of memories surged into her mind. Images of a life shattered, a tragic fate sealed within these very walls. The former guest's story unfolded in vivid detail, a journey of hope turned to despair, a final, desperate night in room 13 that had ended in a mysterious and untimely demise. The spirit's sorrow and rage echoed through her, a cacophony of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her senses. Yet, within the chaos, she discerned a singular truth. The entity sought redemption, a release from the chains that bound it to this place of torment. As the spectral figure's presence washed over her, Lisa understood their roles in this haunting tableau. They were the unwitting heirs to a legacy of sorrow, chosen to bear witness and perhaps to offer solace. She turned to Mark and Ben, her voice barely a whisper, yet filled with a newfound resolve. "We can't run," she said, her eyes locked with theirs in silent understanding. "We have to help." The words hung heavy in the air, a challenge and a promise intertwined. Together, with trembling hands and fearful hearts, they acknowledged the spirit's pain, offering a silent vow to set it free. And as if in response, the room shuddered, the shadows retreating like mist, dissolving in the dawn. The spectral figure, its eyes glowing with gratitude and relief, began to fade, its form dissolving into the ether with a final, lingering whisper. A farewell from a soul at last unburdened. The air in the room seemed to lighten, the oppressive chill lifting as the darkness receded, leaving behind only the echoes of their shared ordeal. Exhausted and shaken, the trio clung to each other amidst the ruins of their terror. The reality of what they'd experienced settling over them like a fragile, haunting dream. The curse of Room 13 had been broken, its tragic tale brought to a close by those brave enough to listen and respond to its desperate cries. As dawn broke over the barren desert, casting its warm glow through the windows, Lisa, Mark, and Ben emerged into the light, forever changed by the night they'd spent in the haunted confines of the Desert Star Motel. As the spectral figure's ethereal form faded into the dim light of dawn, Lisa, Mark, and Ben stood in the silence of Room 13, the weight of their experience hanging heavily in the air like the last notes of a mournful requiem. The realization that they had somehow managed to release the tormented spirit filled them with a mixture of relief and disbelief, their minds struggling to comprehend the reality of the supernatural encounter that had just unfolded. The room, once a prison suffused with the entity's anguish, now felt hollow and drained. Its oppressive shadows dissolved into the nascent glow of a new day. Lisa, still trembling from the ordeal, glanced around at the faded wallpaper and the dusty corners, as if scrutinizing the space for any lingering traces of the haunting. Her heart, however, knew that the ominous presence was no more, and that knowledge brought a quiet sense of triumph over the hidden fears that had bound them to this place. Mark, still processing the gravity of their experience, gazed at his friends with a newfound appreciation for the strength they had shown in the face of spectral terror. The bond forged in fear was now a testament to their courage and solidarity, a reminder of their collective resolve to confront and overcome the inexplicable together. As they gathered their belongings with a solemn sense of purpose, Ben, who had entered the motel a skeptic, found himself forever altered by the events of the night. The rational lens through which he viewed the world had shifted, making room for the mysteries that defied explanation and inviting a tentative acceptance of the unknown. Together, they stepped out of Room 13, the door creaking on its hinges as if bidding farewell to the departing souls who had dared to unravel its dark secrets. The Desert Star Motel, with its flickering neon sign and desolate surroundings, seemed unchanged by the supernatural trial that had unfolded within its walls. Yet Lisa, Mark, and Ben knew that the place would forever hold a special place in the annals of their shared history. As they loaded their car in the pale light of early morning, the vast expanse of the desert stretched out before them, a stark reminder of the isolation and the strange allure that had drawn them to this haunted refuge. The spirits of the past now silent, the trio embarked on the next leg of their journey, the road ahead as uncertain as the night they had left behind. Their conversation was sparse, each lost in thoughts of the spectral encounter that had bound them to room 13 and the vow they had made to honor the spirit's desperate plea for release. With every mile, the motel receded into the distance, fading into the landscape like a mirage, its eerie tale now a part of their own. Yet, as they traveled the empty highways, the echoes of their experience lingered in their minds, a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the spectral world. And though they carried with them the weight of a night spent in the company of the supernatural, they also carried a new understanding of the power of empathy and the courage it takes to confront the unknown. As the desert sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren land, Lisa, Mark, and Ben silently vowed never to forget the ghostly guest of room 13 and the indelible mark it had left on their souls. In the end, it was not fear that defined their journey, but the courage to face it, the strength to stand together, and the willingness to listen to the whispers of a world beyond their own. Forever changing the way they would see the roads and motels that lay ahead. As the sun ascended, casting its relentless heat upon the endless stretch of desert highway, Lisa, Mark, and Ben drove in contemplative silence. The events of the previous night clung to them like an indelible shadow, a constant whisper at the edge of their consciousness. Each mile put distance between them and the Desert Star Motel. Yet the haunting memory of room 13 was inescapable, its spectral presence lingering in every thought. Lisa, sitting in the passenger seat, couldn't shake the image of the mirror's reflection, where she had glimpsed not just the spirit's sorrowful visage, but a fragment of her own vulnerability staring back. It was a moment that transcended fear, an encounter with the unknown that left her pondering the fine line between the tangible world and the mysteries that lay beyond. For Mark, the drive was a chance to process the unfathomable strength they had drawn from each other in the face of terror. He recalled the oppressive atmosphere of the room, where shadows seemed to breathe with a life of their own, and the way their collective resolve had been the beacon guiding them through the darkness. The experience had deepened their friendship, forging an unspoken pact to embrace the extraordinary should their paths ever cross it again. In the driver's seat, Ben wrestled with his newfound belief. As a skeptic, he had entered the motel with a heart armored against the implausible. Yet the night's events had cracked his skepticism wide open. The rational walls he had built were now peppered with tiny fissures where the supernatural seeped in, leaving him both unsettled and oddly exhilarated by the possibilities of what lay beyond human understanding. The empty road stretched before them, an unbroken ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desolation. Yet it was filled with echoes of the past and promises of the unknown yet to come. As the relentless sun beat down, Ben broke the silence, his voice tentative yet resolute. "We did the right thing, you know, helping that spirit find peace," he said, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon. Lisa nodded, her thoughts aligning with his. "I felt it too," she replied. "It wasn't just fear that night. It was like we were meant to be there, to hear its story, to set it free." Mark, his hands resting on the armrest, added, "And maybe to let it teach us something about facing our own fears." Their conversation drifted back into silence, but a silence filled with understanding and shared experience. The desolate landscape outside the car windows mirrored the emptiness they'd felt in the motel. But now it seemed less foreboding, more a canvas awaiting the brush of new experiences. As the miles slipped by, the trio became acutely aware of the road's dual nature. both a path leading away from the past and a bridge to adventures yet untold. The specter of Room 13 had lost its grip, its story a part of them now, woven into the fabric of their lives. And though they journeyed onward with the weight of the supernatural still lingering, they carried with them a newfound courage, a willingness to confront the mysteries of the world and the spaces between reality and the beyond. As the distant silhouette of a small town emerged on the horizon, the friends felt the stirrings of normalcy returning. Yet with it came the unspoken promise to never forget the lessons learned from the ghostly guest who had once called Room 13 home. They knew that wherever the road led, they would face it together, armed with the knowledge that even in the darkest places, light could be found. And that sometimes, the most haunting stories were the ones that revealed the greatest truths. As they approached the small town, its weathered buildings and dusty streets coming into view, the friends felt a subtle shift in the air, as if the very act of leaving the desert behind also meant shedding the remnants of their spectral encounter. The Desert Star Motel, with its haunted Room 13, had become a symbol of their journey, a place where the supernatural had brushed against the ordinary, leaving indelible marks on their souls. The sun hung high overhead, relentless in its intensity, yet the weight of the previous night felt lighter now, transformed from dread into a shared bond. Each of them carried a piece of the motel's mystery, a fragment of the ghost's sorrow and redemption, forever etched into their memories. There was an unspoken understanding that this experience had changed them, that they would never look at the world quite the same way again. As they drove into the heart of the town, a sense of calm enveloped them, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere that had clung to them like a second skin. The town represented normalcy, a return to the known, yet they knew that beneath its mundane surface, the echoes of their ordeal would linger, a reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows of the world. This day, this road, was only a beginning, a canvas for their newfound courage to explore the unknown. And as they parked the car and stepped onto the sun-baked pavement, they each took a deep breath, savoring the moment, aware that their brush with the supernatural had left them with a gift. The fear that once held them captive now became their ally, a force that would guide them through the untold stories waiting just beyond the horizon.